underneath all of leadership or just, wounded kids.
Do you have repetitive patterns that interfere with your achieving your goals and successes, yet were never aware of what was getting in your way? Welcome. I'm your host, Terry Yoffe of Try Coaching. In today's competitive business landscape, can you afford not to be at the top of your game? What's stopping you from reaching your desired outcomes and successes? Perhaps you aren't in alignment with what you are doing or haven't figured out your purpose or passion and need to create change to get there. As a certified executive career, business, and communications coach, I help clients unlock their potential to greater growth, self-awareness, and becoming the best version of themselves so they can be at the top of their game. You can learn more about me at trycoaching.com. Have a look at what I am about, what I offer, and my testimonials. If you think partnering might help you achieve your goals, let's start a conversation.
Which is the epidemic of not enoughness. I think that is the driver of so much of our behavior.
In Kelly's own words, trauma doesn't need to be physical or severe. It can be hidden just beneath the surface and affect everything you do. Kelly Campbell, a trauma-informed leadership coach to emerging and established visionaries who know they are meant for more, yet can't figure out how to get out of their own way to achieve these successes. What stops them from aspiring to greater heights? Kelly lets us in the new TLC, the intersection of trauma, leadership, and consciousness. Kelly believes that once leaders become conscious of their childhood trauma, wounds, and not good enough syndromes, they can become the leaders they feel they are meant to be. Kelly is also founder of Consciousness Leaders, the world's most diverse and equitable speakers agency, and author of Heal to Lead, due out on April 16. Welcome, Kelly Campbell. So in all transparency, Kelly and I have known each other a very long time, and it is such an honor, truly, to see Kelly's trajectory over the years. She has gone through major transformations, and I'm going to ask Kelly, tell us a little bit about how you got to where you are.
Well, thank you, first of all, for inviting me onto the show. It's literally been, I think we calculated it the other day, it's been about 20 years that we've known each other. So
we were kids in kindergarten.
Oh my goodness. How I got to where I am. When we were working together, you were a mentor of mine when I was about 24 years old. And I had just started a digital marketing agency that was focused on causes, nonprofits and foundations and things like that. And that felt very purposeful in the world. And I was bright-eyed and bushy-tailed and, thought I was going to create change that way. And that was my calling and that was my purpose. And all these years later, what I've come to realize is I created that business out of a trauma response. I did not get certain needs met in childhood. And so that business was ultimately me trying to recreate the conditions in which I was getting needs met, that I was wanted, that I was valued, that I mattered by, wanted and needed by my employees, by my clients, by our partners, in the agency. And so the business could never sustain, could never give me what I really, really needed, because I had to figure out that I needed to give me that. So when I guess we were about 14 years into the agency. I was 36 and I ended up selling it, not because it was a $20 million organization, not because I was being recruited to something else, not because I had an idea to start something else. It was from a place of being really unwell. And I think getting real with myself and figuring out I can't keep going on this path. There has to be a different path. I don't know what that new path looks like. And there was a lot of fear and uncertainty. But ultimately, I knew that I think on some level, I knew I was meant for more than running this cause marketing agency. I just didn't know what that was. So it was a really scary place, a really scary time. Fast forward, that was about 8 years ago. I am now a trauma-informed leadership coach and really understanding what my purpose is in the world. And I think many of us who start our own endeavors figure out, hopefully, at some point that some of the gifts that we had when we were smaller, some of the strategies that we employed, some of the things that kept us smaller actually come full circle and come around to become the things that we help others with in the world. So what I mean by all of that is by serving people in a way as a coach through a trauma-informed lens, helping them correlate their childhood trauma to their leadership style. That helps not only them, but all of the people within their organization, their family, their community. The ripple effect, to use that cliche, is real. And so that's sort of an encapsulation of where I was when we met and where I am now.
You brought up such an interesting point, which I would guess isn't only related to you, which was we all have traumas, right, in our life, that needs that weren't met. And when we always look for ways to get them met, you did it through your agency being wanted, being needed, which was something you hoped, I'm going to guess, would give you some kind of feeling, oh yeah, I'm wanted, I'm needed, isn't that great? But, and this is just a question, does it really solve our problems in that way?
Yeah. And the answer is it never does, right? It never does. And also I want to underscore that it was not a conscious, oh, I want to become wanted and needed, right? It's all unconscious. What I was really doing was I was proving to myself and proving to my mother and proving to everyone that I was good, that I was competent, that I was trustworthy, that I was fill in the blank, smart enough. I think everything comes down to what I talk about in the book and Heal to Lead, which is the epidemic of not enoughness. I think that is the driver of so much of our behavior, whether we work inside of corporations as leaders or we are actually the leader of the organization. It makes no difference. There's so much of not blank enough, and we walk around and we think and speak and behave in ways that are all coming from that wounded place.
As an executive coach and business coach myself, I have found that the underlying thread for everyone, not good enough, not worthy enough. And that's what I call, and it's unconscious, right? It's a preconceived notion that we've put in place. So what happens is until we understand it and it comes to the surface, we replay, and that's what we get in our lives. And for me, being worthy was making money. That was important to me. And as I started to grow in my career, in one of my careers, I did so well and I made money. And, by then I had been through a lot of therapy to understand what was going on with me and where my needs were needed. being in a place where I could feel confident and people looked up to me and people liked me. So I do think that's a thread that goes through everybody. If you are lucky enough to have that come to the surface and work through it, then you can go on to do things that actually mean something to you where you're not proving something.
The only thing that I would build on with that is I don't know that it comes down to luck so much as everyone has access to that. To me, it comes down to two other things: being courageous enough and willing.
Absolutely.
Right?
Did I use the word luck?
You did.
Oh, no, not a good word. Not a good word.
But that's what it is, right? It's like, I think most people have to hit some kind of rock bottom or have to get keen to themselves, get onto themselves. They have to come to a place where it's like, I can't keep going like this anymore. Something has to change, right? That's the point where people rub up against this. Okay, now I'm willing. Because if life is pretty good or it's not too bad, there's not enough impetus for people to make a significant change and start developing the self-awareness that they need.
So you got to that place, and what was the trajectory as you move forward? The whole trauma-informed leadership. How did that come about?
So after I sold the agency, I started consulting with other agency owners because everyone thought, oh, well, you've reached the holy grail, right? You had this company, you built it up from nothing for over the course of 14 years. You sold it. No one sells an agency. It's really hard to do that. You must know some secret. And I didn't know any secret. I had made lots and lots and lots of mistakes over the course of those 14 years. But there were some things that I sort of figured out. And I think most of those were related more to like emotional intelligence and conscious leadership, although I didn't know what those were at the time. That wasn't language that was sort of available to me at the time. But in consulting with these agencies, what I noticed over and over again was, okay, yes, the communication was getting better with the teams, clients were happier, business development was flowing a little bit more easily because our positioning was honed, all of this sort of marketing and positioning and tactical things that you would do, right? Knowing how to do that and figuring out how to do that. But what I noticed was that the leaders themselves were still really overwhelmed, really anxious, sort of micromanaging, numbing themselves with all sorts of addictive behaviors, whether that was alcohol or overwork, you name it. And nobody was talking about that until I had one client who said, can we talk about this? I noticed that this happened at work and I came home and I had gotten a fight with my wife. And I think it was because of something that's unrelated to both of these things. Can we talk about that? And it was like the heavens parted and everything inside of my body was like, oh God, that's all I want to talk about. That's it. So we pushed on that bruise and it became, we unraveled that thread and it became a much larger conversation. And that literally was the start of the trajectory of this work, because I knew intuitively that underneath all of leadership were just, wounded kids, right? And so we just keep playing out these things and hoping for a different result every single time in every single situation. And so that became sort of like, okay, now this is what I want to be doing. It's not really the consulting. There's lots of consultants out there. No one's touching trauma. No one is saying, I will touch that, because no one would touch it with a 10-foot pole. And I'm not a therapist and I won't ever become a therapist. But for me, the trauma-informed coach training that I have gone through and continue to improve upon and learn is everything, because it's all about space holding. It's all about helping people to empowering other people to understand what's actually going on with themselves, their repetitive patterns, some of their maladaptive behaviors, helping them to understand those things about themselves. It's not my job to unpack them with them. That would be a therapist's job. I stay very clearly in my lane. I really like sitting in this seat because I get to watch these transformations unfold right before me, with my clients. And so I'm doing that on a one-to-one basis and now on a group basis as well.
I do the same thing with coaching.
Yeah, that's what it is. Mm-hmm.
Exactly. Because I went through so many years of analysis on a couch 3 times a week for years, I do understand, I think, about the human mind, which is the same for everybody. It's just the first computer goes back. And I work with clients on going deep and figuring out what's getting in their way of getting what they want. They may think I don't want this, but when we really dig, it's so different. So it's similar.
It's similar. It's just I think the difference, because I had been in therapy also for about 15, 16 years. I think the difference is in therapy, you're talking about, things that have maybe happened when you were younger, or things that are happening currently, or friction that you're having with other people. You're talking about that and it stays very cerebral. And so from a trauma-informed lens, you're bringing the somatics into the picture, right? So you're moving trauma or helping to move trauma out of the body. You're holding space for difficult emotions that may arise, not trying to quell them or fix or solve. I think I didn't understand in the very beginning the difference between coaching and consulting. But really the difference is that, to put it plainly, in consulting, I'm the one doing the work as the advisor. In coaching, the client is the one doing the work because they are the subject matter expert of their own lives. I'm not there. I'm just there to hold the space and ask really poignant or reflective questions so that they can get to where they want to go, and then figure out what kind of change they want to make and then commit to that change. So it's a really beautiful container that gets created.
What do you find once you've helped somebody find that out? How do they create change? So you help create change within them, and then they take it out to their organizations and start to reform how they behave in the leadership environment.
I think it's subtle at first. These aren't, from the outset, it's not gigantic changes. It's in the subtle shifts. It's in them becoming a little less anxious. It's in them becoming a little bit more vulnerable in what they share with people within their organization. It's the way that they show up, not just at work, but also at home, let's say with spouse or kids or what have you. So these are small shifts in their way of being, I would call it. They're getting closer to their true nature, which is kind-hearted and loving and empathetic and compassionate and vulnerable, human. They're getting back to their humanity versus wearing the mask that they've been wearing for all of these years, ever since someone in their past told them who they should be versus who they really were.
I think we all wear masks.
Oh, 100%.
And as a younger person, I always smiled and looked good because I grew up in a family of narcissists where how you looked mattered 100%. I had to dress right and be out there. And I was in the fashion world. It was perfect. I fit in perfectly until I realized that I was miserable because that mask wasn't who I was and who I wanted to be. And meanwhile, I was screaming inside. And that led me to my path of analysis. And, the amount of crying to get it out and the walls that we all build, they start to come down. And that becomes very scary.
Of course.
Then you're vulnerable. And most people vulnerable, what? Who wants that?
Well, we've been taught for all of these years, lied to, that being vulnerable was actually being weak, right? We think that we're still on a battlefield. You don't want to be vulnerable on a battlefield, but you do want to be vulnerable within your organization, within your family, within your relationships. That's the way to build connection.
So tell us about the group that you have formed, the Speakers Agency.
Yeah, so I founded, that was after the murder of George Floyd in 2020. So actually, 2021, I founded Consciousness Leaders, which is essentially a representation agency for women, BIPOC, LGBTQ, disabled, and military veterans who happen to be speakers and workshop facilitators, maybe even coaches and consultants. And what we do is we pair these people with organizations who are in need of their services and their lived experience and their expertise. So yeah, that's just coming up on its third year anniversary. And that's talk about creating change, in that speakers bureau world, it's very disruptive because the way in which we operate, first of all, we are the world's most diverse and equitable agency, speakers agency. In that world, it's disruptive because the other agencies, the traditional speakers agencies, they don't operate that way. They operate with very extractive business practices. They may lock people into contracts for 12 years, for example. They may take 40, 50, 60% of their fees. They may ask for exclusivity so that they can't be represented in other places. There are so many components of that business model that didn't feel good to me. So when I started this one, I thought, okay, here's my chance to create something with 100% intention and integrity and in line with the values that I hold dear. And I know so many other people hold as well. So I'm very proud of Consciousness Leaders, and it's doing really, really well. It took a couple of years for us to build the collective up, but it's really hitting the ground running this year.
How do you find people, the speakers, to join the organization?
So it's curated, it's invitation only. These are people who I see doing amazing work out in the world and I invite them in. Or there are existing collective members who say, I really understand the ethos of this organization. I think that this person would actually make a great addition to the collective. So they put us in touch. So it's either referral internally or it's me sort of looking outward and saying, oh, that person, that's another unicorn. That's another person who's doing amazing work in the world. And I would love to be working with them.
So let's talk about that book behind you. Heal to Lead. Talk about the book. It's coming out
April 16th. It'll be out. It's available for pre-order now. Heal to Lead, my baby. It's been in the making for about 5 years, but really, really intensely in the last year. So it's Heal to Lead, revolutionizing leadership through trauma healing. What I posit in the book is that we've all heard about, or maybe not all of us, but many of us have heard about conscious leadership. And just from the phrase, we can understand that it means, leading with a level of consciousness and awareness, maybe a self-awareness, right? You can probably assume that there's some empathy sprinkled into that. There's probably, conscious leadership is all about having people, planet, and profit on equal plane. Beautiful. I love it. It came out about a decade ago, built off of the conscious capitalism movement. John Mackey, who is the former CEO of Whole Foods, and Raj Sisodia, these were the co-founders of conscious capitalism. Beautiful intention. 10 years later, it's not mainstream. Why? The very first part of becoming a conscious leader is about developing self-awareness. Nobody has talked about, well, how do you develop self-awareness? How do you do that? What I posit is we have to touch our trauma. We have to heal and integrate the wounds that we have distanced ourselves from for so long. So Heal to Lead is really, it's 4 foundations for becoming what I call a high conscious leader. And the very first one is integrating trauma. So it's a call. I think right now, the world that we live in really, really needs more people to wake up, to want to be courageous and willing to do their work, their inner work, their healing work, so that they can develop more self-awareness, sure, but more self-love, more conscious communication in the world, more of the ability to see 2 sides or more of a particular issue. I don't think that there's ever a time more than now than this is needed. So Yeah, the book is it's very powerful. It's not like any leadership book you have ever read before. And I think in the beginning, when we were talking to different publishers, there was a question, does this belong in self-help or does this belong in business leadership? And I was very, very adamant this 100% belongs in business leadership because that's, and it's not just business, organizational leadership, let's say, because that's where the healing is needed most. If people are onto themselves and they want to go over to the self-help section of the Amazon or Barnes and Noble or a bookstore, great. There's tons of books there. But this is sort of in the direction, or I don't know, maybe it's moving a stone uphill, a boulder uphill, but I'm okay with that. Yeah, I'm very excited about this book coming out.
Your take, where do you think the business landscape is for leaders that really want to become extraordinary leaders, where they are or considering doing healing to get to that place versus don't bother me, I'm not going that route?
I think that they're stuck. I think even the younger, more emerging leaders who understand, oh, I do need to heal. I do need to, become more self-aware. There's a different way that I need to lead than those who came before me led. But I think they're stuck because they don't know all of the different modalities that are available to them. I think it's still one of those things where all we talk about is therapy. We don't talk about all of these other millions of modalities that are available to us from a trauma integration perspective. And they're stuck because inside of our institutions and our systems, there's still this idea that is not, there's no place for that, right? That trauma and healing and all this other stuff is still taboo in many of our organizations. So a leader who wants to make change might still be fighting against a board of directors or some investors or even their own employees, because the leader's job is also to create psychological safety and belonging, and they have to do that in a way where they're modeling that. So they've got work to do before they can bring that into the organization and then change some minds who might be pulling some strings above them. So I think that they're feeling a little stuck right now. And I'm hoping that this book is going to help them really understand that they're on the right path and that they, can have that courage and that willingness to move forward and really take action and have conviction about it. That's what it's all about, having that conviction and actually making the changes that need to be made inside of organizations.
Do you feel that today's younger generation of leaders are more apt to go the route of healing and self-aware versus the older that are very set in their ways and they're not going to change? And the second part is male versus female.
Okay, so there's a lot to unpack there. The first question about the younger leaders, I did an ayahuasca journey in October of 2022, which is ayahuasca is a psychedelic plant medicine. I did it in the middle of the Amazon rainforest with 11 other people. I and a friend of mine who's the same age as I am, we were the two of the oldest people in the group. All of the other people, all of the other leaders were much younger than us. They were in their 20s and 30s. And this was no big deal to them. The younger generations understand from a very, very young age. I have lots of theories about that, but that's another show. They understand that this is the way forward. This isn't a thing that we're making up or isn't even an opinion. This is the future. This is the trajectory where we're going. We're just seeing a lot of very loud voices that are in opposition to it right now. But this is the way that everything is going. So yes, I do believe, to answer your question. The other question that you asked about male versus female, first of all, I don't believe in a binary. I identify as gender fluid. So male versus female isn't a thing for me, but I understand that for many people it is. And so I will tell you that the very, very first conversation that I mentioned earlier about the client who said, hey, this is happening, in my personal life and in the organization. Can we talk about that? That was a male. That was a male client who said that. And maybe it's because I had historically worked in the creative, marketing, advertising, creative fields. There were more male clients who were more willing to have conversations about their mental health or what was happening for them on an emotional level. Maybe it was because it was the industry that I was working in. So maybe that's a little skewed. But I would say equally across all genders, this is a human conversation, right? Not so much of a gender-based conversation. All that to say, the people who we see as the most low conscious leaders in the world happen to be men. That's not to say that's an exclusive. There are low conscious women leaders, but yeah, by and large, it has been. And it's also not their fault, right? Well, I'm not here to vilify male leaders who happen to be low conscious, the Donald Trumps of the world, the Elon Musks of the world. I'm not vilifying them. I see them very much as wounded little boys. I have joked around with my partner to say, I would love nothing more than to be Elon Musk's leadership coach. And she laughed. And it was like, no, really, I would love to do that because I see so clearly, as much as I can see from the outside, what is actually happening. And he has actually been vocal. I don't know if he meant to do it or not, but he's been vocal about the childhood trauma that he has endured. And I see it so clearly playing out in his leadership style. And so it's very textbook to me. If he were willing and courageous enough to do that, I would love to do that.
Oh, maybe if you tell him you'll get on a plane with him or his flying machine or whatever and go up in space with him for a week.
I hear that. And I also need to create safety for myself physically, right, emotionally,
right, obviously.
So we would be over Zoom. But yeah, that kind of stuff doesn't scare me. It doesn't. I feel very comfortable with things like that.
Oh gosh,
we could talk for hours.
I know. Can you just you've done, this is so incredible, such straightforward talking and inspirational. Some I call nuggets that you can leave our audience with, and then how they can pre-order the book.
So I don't, pretend to know everything. I've learned a lot. I mean, I'm 44 now. I've learned a lot in 44 years. What I would say is if you've never been to therapy, you've never talked to someone, that's a really, really great sort of gateway. That's a good first step. It's not the thing that's going to help you integrate your trauma, though. And this might feel a little controversial, but I do believe that there is a bifurcation between mental health maintenance and trauma healing modalities, trauma integration modalities. So part of the book, there's a supplement that's also going to be available online, even if you don't ever order the book. There's going to be a supplemental website that's a gigantic resource of thousands and thousands of modalities that are available to anyone and everyone. I'm not recommending any. What I'm doing is I'm saying, here is the menu, right? It's literally called my healing menu. And so here's the menu of all of the things that are available. And I've categorized them as appetizers and shared plates and entrees and desserts for particular reasons. And I think, when that comes out, it's going to be something that will be invitational for people to browse through and see what calls to them. So I think my big nugget of information or wisdom is get curious. I think when you talked about a fixed mindset all the time on the show. And so when we have a fixed mindset and we don't have that opportunity or that curiosity to say, I wonder what that's like, or I don't know what this could be for me. I heard that so-and-so did this modality. Instead of judging that or saying that's not for me, I would never do that. get curious, right? You never know what some of these things are going to do for you. It could be as simple as holotropic breath work. It could be taking a yoga class. It could be cold plunging. It might be plant medicine. And there are a million other things that can help. So it's really about listening to your intuition as to what is calling to you and what feels like it's something that could be useful to you. And really, I think the last thing is the somatic aspect of trauma healing and integration. Somatics meaning movement. The more that we realize that trauma gets trapped in our bodies and needs to come out in some way. You mentioned crying before. Crying is a great way to purge. There are lots and lots of other ways to move that trauma through and out of the body. And that really, really helps. Again, in our culture, we think of things that are simplistic as not very valuable. Here's a great opportunity to dial up that curiosity again and say, you know what, even though breath work or something like that sounds really simple, how could that possibly help me? Get curious, because I'm telling you, it could.
I love that. I always use the fixed mindset versus the growth mindset. Make a switch. Growth mindset, open the lens to what's available. And for me, part of my healing in talking about somatic is I'd spend weekends in the house putting music on that made me cry. I would spend the weekend bawling. So the walls that I didn't know I had built were like mind-boggling as they started to come down. And, yes, as you said, it takes courage. It takes bravery for sure. And in the end, it's worth it.
Yeah. Think about all the emotional labor you were doing to keep all of those walls erected. Right. And that's why it took you to the point where it brought you to your knees and you were crying and you were emoting and there was so much inside of you. That makes sense to me, because you're literally doing all of that work to keep yourself armored and wear these masks. And, it's tiring. It's physically
exhausting,
tiring, mentally, emotionally, you name it. So when it does break down, yes, there's a lot that comes out. And instead of being scared that that's going to happen, just accept that's what's going to happen, right? It's a lot easier to say, oh, okay, well, now I know what to expect, right? So now I'm going to go ahead and do it, because you're doing it not just for yourself. You're doing it for everyone in your family, whether you have good relationships or bad relationships with them. You're doing it for the benefit of future generations that aren't even here yet. You're doing it for the benefit of your organization.
Mostly you're doing it for you. So
you are doing it for you. It's just the ripple effect.
Right, of course.
Yeah.
And if you're really, really interested in Heal to Lead, comes out in April. You can pre-order it, I'm guessing, on Amazon.
Can pre-order at Amazon and Barnes & Noble. There's also more information about it on my website, which is at klcampbell.com.
Please, folks, go to her website, read about her. She is an amazing, amazing person that I personally have watched transform for so many years. Kelly, I cannot thank you for being here. And one last thing, Kelly was my inspiration for starting a podcast. I'm in my third year, 2 years ago. So there we go. Kelly, wonderful. Thank you. I have so appreciated your being here. I cannot tell you how honored I am that we've been able to have this conversation.
Thank you, Terry. I appreciate our relationship as well. And thank you so much for having me on the show.
You're very welcome. We just heard Kelly say that we all have trauma and wounds, which are keeping us from being the best version of ourselves and achieving our own successes. I'm hoping that this compelling and extraordinary conversation with Kelly Campbell has offered you thoughts on how you can create your own changes by making choices that matter to you. If you enjoyed this podcast, please leave a review on Apple Podcasts. Thank you for joining the conversation. For related content on extraordinary work, please visit my website, trycoaching.com. Always remember, when you work with passion and purpose, your work can become extraordinary. Happy 50th episode of Extraordinary Work, conversations about creating change. And we are welcoming back Craig Siegel, founder of Cultivate Lasting Symphony and the Wall Street Journal and USA Today best-selling author of The Reinvention Formula. Craig went from Wall Street to the street of passion and purpose, inspiring and helping millions worldwide overcome limiting beliefs and embracing their true, authentic self and purpose. This is an episode you won't want to miss.